Law firm Hogan Lovell says it's always wanted its report on former Sars head and business and individual taxes, Jonas Makwakwa, to be made public. Sars has released the law firm from its obligation to maintain attorney-client confidentiality. The Standing Committee on Finance says it will not fully engage the Makwakwa and the KPMG matters, as these will be dealt with in the disciplinary inquiry of suspended Sars Commissioner Tom Moyane. The full report on Makwakwa has been given to the committee. We now speak to Wessel Badenhorst from Hogan Lovell. Good evening, Wessel. Thank you very much for talking to us. Well, first, the report was given to, you gave your report to your client. Why would you be so interested in talking about it or putting it out there?
Well, I think what we should do is we should go back as to where the story started. In October of last year, Tom Moyane came and had a media statement and a press conference and said Mr. Makwakwa was cleared of all charges related to the FIC report. That was immediately corrected by us and saying that we didn't clear him of all the charges, and from there a story developed and a theory developed. And so it was
always in your interest to put that record, set that record straight.
Well, absolutely right, and particularly because it's a public matter, it's a matter in which the public has an interest, and we wanted that report to be made public. That, of course, was Sars's decision to make, being the holder of the legal privilege. And we encouraged Sars to do so publicly, and we are very, very happy that the report has now been made public and been given to the committee, and a robust debate could have happened on it during the course of today.
And what for you are the most important findings of that report?
The very important distinction to make between the FIC report and the requests that the FIC made to Sars to investigate is the distinction between the organized crime or potential corruption on the part of Mr. Makwakwa versus his tax affairs, and then, on the other hand, any misconduct that he would have faced as an employee. Our report went into misconduct in his capacity as an employee. The tax issues had to be dealt with by Sars as the tax collector, and the criminal aspects had to be investigated by the Hawks. The Hawks were already seized with a complaint. They were investigating it, and those two criminal processes must run parallel to the process, and that's the misperception that we wanted to clear up. We also wanted to clear up that there was no manipulation of the process, there was no untoward limitation of our mandate. The law dictates what had to happen, and you saw today in the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee that Acting Commissioner Kingham confirmed that as tax collector, the tax that Sars has to then obviously investigate Mr. Makwakwa. He couldn't give any answers on it because of confidentiality attaching to that under the Tax Administration Act, but we understand that such an investigation, if appropriate, will take place.
But from what you understand, this may well have been or not have been in your purview, but from your understanding, what ought to have happened after you had submitted your report?
See, I think what we need to understand is when the FIC report goes to Sars, it goes to Sars under the FIC Act. And it goes to it could go to various government agencies. Sars is just one of 9 agencies that would receive it. So you have your prosecuting authorities, you have your fiscus, you have your tax collector, you have your ombudsman, you have all of these parties that would have to work in tandem in order to look at this matter. So what should have happened here is a comprehensive and in parallel investigation, and that's what we in our report made very clear, to say that the Hawks must continue with their investigation and the tax investigation must continue. Now, regrettably, what had happened is the Hawks had not completed its investigation. We don't know what the standing of that is, and we don't know what the outcome of the tax issue is. But what we made very clear as labour lawyers in the matter is that if Mr. Makwakwa committed tax evasion, that would immediately strike to his employment, and that would be misconduct. And unfortunately, that process was not completed at the time. Now, you may want to ask me the question, why did it take so long? Why did we have to put the charges to him? Unfortunately, the process had been dragging on during that period of time. And Mr. Makwakwa was saying, I can't stay on suspension indefinitely. You need to now put the charges to me. You need to put to me what you have. Otherwise, it becomes an unfair suspension. And that brought the matter to its particular point. In hindsight, where we are is, if we hadn't charged him at that point in time with what we had, is we would have had an unfair suspension. the reinstatement of Mr. Makwakwa simply because it was unfair to continue to suspend him, and still we have no outcome of the Hawks' investigation. We still don't know what the tax affairs tell us.
Well, the Parliamentary Committee, Understanding Committee on Finance, says, but among other things, that their committee believes that the President should, if possible, consider whether it is appropriate to include SARS response to IFF as part of the terms of reference of the Commission in a way that does not unduly delay the Commission's other work. The Commission, of course, being the Commission that has been announced by the President to look into SARS activities. Do you have a view on that?
Well, I think where we are at the moment is we are at a very important stage within our governmental processes. We're coming out of a process and a time which appeared to have been characterized by grand corruption. And what we're trying to come to grips with within government and within society is how can we avoid that happening again. And one of the issues that came out in the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee specifically is that when we look at the Makwakwa matter and we look at Tom Moyane, we're looking at the past. We need to start also looking at the future. We need to look at checks and balances. So a comprehensive investigation and a comprehensive inquiry would always serve a public interest, and we would support that.
Well, I mean, inquiry is going to, of course, take place. It has finally been established, even though Jonas Karim says here it has taken far too long to establish it. But it has now been established. But before we even get the benefit of, going through the inquiry, from what you know, from what you discovered from this episode, given just how senior this particular official was, and of course how many people say Tom Moyane mishandled this matter, what are the most obvious lessons to learn even before we get into an inquiry?
I think in that respect, I'd like to refer you to what Acting Commissioner Kingham said this morning when he addressed the committee. He said that in hindsight, it would have been better for SARS to first complete its tax investigation, then you have an outcome, then you know whether or not your senior man has evaded tax, and then you get into the HR or the employment issues. Now, the difficulty that we had here was that didn't happen. These processes were running in parallel, and there's a whole history as to why that has happened. But one of the things that SARS has mentioned today was it grapples with its senior executives in the context of being employed by the tax collector, but also being employees. So as employees, they have rights as protected under the Labour Relations Act and due process, but also at the same time, their own tax affairs immediately strike on their employment. I mean, your and my tax affairs don't necessarily strike at our employment, but someone who sits at the helm of the Revenue Service would have to be beyond question. And that was a telling admission during the course of today, and I think one which is where we are focusing as to an area where maybe we can improve in future.
We've run out of time, but very, very briefly, how do other jurisdictions or countries deal with that particular aspect? It's dealt with in terms of various laws and very strict compliance issues. We have the framework of all of these things. We have the FIC, we have fiscal oversight on all of these things. Other jurisdictions simply have stronger checks and balances, and that's perhaps where we can learn a thing or two. That's where we're going to leave it for this evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
For coming through. Wessel Badenhorst, who of course was firm, made a submission to Parliament. He has told us of their involvement and the history there too.